Hi, it's Kirby Summers, and I welcome you to a true crime podcast here on my channel. It is July 11th. July 11th. It sounds nuts. We're July 11th. All right. Well, July 11th, 2024. It is a Thursday. Alec Baldwin's trial started yesterday. And the reason I wanted to sort of do this podcast for those of you who subscribe to my channel here on YouTube is because, as many of you know, I have been diligently deep diving into Dr. Henry Jarecki, who was found to have been I'm going to use quotes, psychiatrist used by Epstein, to whom he referred some of the, I don't know what to call. I mean, it's very difficult on this platform. Some of the girls slash women slash boys too, on a regular basis. In fact, I had sort of heard about this about 2 or 3 years ago from one of the Palm Beach girls, one of the original girls in Palm Beach. And I'm using the word girl because at the time she was 14. And then it was a requirement, I believe, just before Epstein entered the plea bargain, it was a requirement for him to settle with some of the girls that had stepped forward. And by then they were no longer young teenagers, but they were still young and having a lot of difficulty. And it's my understanding that it was Dr. Jarecki, and you are hearing this here for the first time. It's never been said by anyone else before, but even back during that time with the non-prosecution agreement provided to Epstein by Alexander Acosta, they were sent as per the agreement. It was written in the agreement that not only they be compensated financially, but as an addendum to that agreement, which no one has discussed, was the proviso, the necessary step was to also see not just an Epstein recommended attorney, which should have raised even more red flags than it did when everyone found out about this, but an Epstein recommended psychiatrist who was Henry Jarecki at that time. Jarecki is now 91. And about a month ago, one of the women, she's now in her 40s, sued him. And I believe you know that it was because she alleges he turned her into his private slave. Okay, so those of you who are following my work know that I have been deep diving on the Jarecki clan specifically. And in part 2 of my Jarecki kind of like going in and examining certain things that initially we don't pay a lot of attention to, I came straight into Alec Baldwin. We all know he is said to have accidentally shot and killed someone on the set of his movie Rust. So I wrote, again, a very well-received article, which included information on Alec Baldwin. And while I can't read the whole article on this platform, I'm going to share as much as I can. And if you haven't joined my Substack, I do share a lot of information free. Although, some of the stuff that I can't share broadly, it is part of my newsletter on Substack. I've also, by the way, shared some information on my Patreon. And before I get started, please like the podcast. And if you have not subscribed, take a moment to do so. So, in summary, so regarding the trial and it's a manslaughter trial, an involuntary manslaughter trial that began on Wednesday, July the 10th. Basically, the prosecutors began to paint him as someone who was a headstrong actor, and that he did not really he didn't like do proper due diligence regarding gun safety on the set of his movie Rust. And then the defense argued that the death of the movie's cinematographer was the result of other crew member failures. And so Baldwin's attorneys basically said that the 2021 shooting of Helena, I think that's how you pronounce her name, Hutchins, was, quote, a tragic accident. The prosecutors instead are working to convince the jurors that it was a direct result of his recklessness while handling dangerous weapons on a film set. So basically, that's what's going on. That's what's going on right now. I have a different take on what happened on the set, especially after I found Alec Baldwin smack in the middle of my deep dive into Jarecki. And so I'm going to share with you as much as I can. So just let me share with you some basic information about Henry Jarecki. He was born April 15th, 1933 in Germany. He is the son of another physician. They claim in his Wikipedia page, which we know collectively, we cannot trust Wikipedia as a source. However, for the sake of this platform, I'm going to share what Wikipedia says about him. That he fled Nazi Germany with his family, moving to the United Kingdom, and then to the United States. However, he, in 1957, graduated from Heidelberg University. Now, that's in Germany. So he went back to Germany, as did his brother, by the way. And another thing that's been happening is I have been getting a lot of, I'm going to call them bites, nibbles, pokes by Jarecki connected people. I guess they don't like the fact that I'm deep diving. What else is new, right? What else is new? So they go on to say that his wealthy family, so he is a multi-generational kind of like member of the elite. Okay, that his wealthy family was able to transfer their wealth. Well, that's pretty convenient. I don't know of many people who were able to transfer their wealth unless they had pre-knowledge of what was happening. He then and the kinds of things that he learned, by the way, are the kinds of things we've heard about in regards to the Nazi atrocities during World War II and the so-called experiments that are connected to CIA's MK Ultra. So he published a number of articles in the psychiatric field. He, quote, taught at Yale. Yale. So basically the Bush family, you know that the Bush family attended Yale. Yale is known for the Skull and Bone Society. He wrote a 733-page study of drugs and their therapeutic qualities that was used in hospitals. We know that through the church committee hearing documents that about 144, that possibly the number changes depending on what documents you read, so anywhere from 144 to 180 prisons, child mind asylums, so, and not just in the United States but also in Canada. Okay. People taken off the street involuntarily, regular hospitals. I mean, the list goes on, and universities. We know about Ted Kaczynski at Harvard University, who was the subject of an MK Ultra experiment. There are other so-called criminals, I'm using that in quotes, who are in reality victims of these MK Ultra experiments. What Jarecki learned in school was these sort of experiments that then translated and became part of what was used by Epstein. Okay. So the photo that I used for Jarecki Part 2, and I'm working on Jarecki Part 3, where I have found massive dirt on very well-known names, which I'm just, I'm letting it all kind of hang out on my Substack. It's like, oh, well, this explained, and once you read it and you see who I'm outing and naming, you'll understand why these people became so well known as actors and actresses. And while I'm aware that females now wish to be called actors, I'm sorry, I still draw the line, and I'm going to say an actor if it's a male and an actress if it's a female. That's how I plan to do this. I'm not one to go by cultural conditioning. I demand and insist on maintaining the right to refer to someone as to their birth gender. I retain that right, and that's what I do when I'm speaking about either Cate Blanchett or Woody Allen. In any event, the photo that I use for Part 2 is Henry Jarecki with Mohammed Atta, and I think you know what that name implies. And then I start that basically one of the many Hollywood A-listers that began following my now scrubbed Twitter account, which happened as soon as Elon Musk took over, was Alec Baldwin. And really, at the time, and then I include the fact that he was in Epstein's Black Book. And, I had come across, while I was writing this, a YouTube video showing Alec Baldwin having some kind of his own podcast or something, or his own show. I really didn't notice, but he invited, and she appeared, basically. This had to be in 2019. It could have even been 2018, where he invited, sorry, Julie K. Brown of the Miami Herald. And his line of questioning was really interesting to me, as were her answers. So his line of questioning basically included, well, I was on his list, but I don't know him. I don't, I never met him. Did I? And so that he was taking that interview to basically insert a tremendous amount of pushback against the fact that he appeared in the Black Book. But I now see that he appears in the Black Book for a reason. The other mistake that no one caught was that while he's interviewing Julie K. Brown, he refers to Jeffrey Epstein in the beginning portion of the conversation as Jeffrey Epstein. So if you do not know Jeffrey Epstein, that is what you're going to refer to him as. His friends, however, refer to him as Jeff. And then we have a whole bunch of people that refer to him as Uncle Jeff, right? So somewhere along the middle of this interview, he starts referring to him as Jeff. It's not a slip of the tongue in the sense that he's going to shorten the name to make his point. It's that he does know him, and he knows him rather well, frankly. So that's what I found. It was, and then also I didn't like the fact that Julie Brown didn't push back against the fact that he was in Epstein's Black Book and ask him more questions about this. But anyway, I live in New York City. I go to a lot of places. I do a lot of things in the city. It's what you do. That's why we live in Manhattan. And one of the, I basically, I'm not really an Alec Baldwin fan or anything. I'm not really a fan of many people, many actors or many actresses, really. I knew Baldwin more because whenever I went to a restaurant, he would be there, right? So it was like, okay, well, we like the same restaurants. I had seen his brother in the movie Sliver, and the movie Sliver is kind of interesting because it's written by Ira Levin, and it's about an apartment building where the landlord, played by Billy Baldwin, has equipped surveillance cameras and microphones inside every apartment. And that was basically and I may have mentioned this in a previous podcast, and this was long before anyone knew about the mansion at East 71st Street provided to Epstein by Leslie Wexner. And so that was sort of like interesting. And I had done a deep dive with Professor Hamamoto on his show regarding Ira Levin, I believe two, maybe 3 years ago. And then I realized, oh, well, wait a minute. Sliver was produced by Robert Evans, and I had written about Evans many times before in connection with the Vatican Bank scandal, the missing teenage girls, and several people in Epstein's circle, including Roman Polanski, who basically, directed Rosemary's Baby, which has, of course, well, I'm going to leave a lot, Mia Farrow, right? Love Story, starring Ali McGraw, whom Evans would later marry and divorce. Ryan O'Neal, who got his start working with Mia Farrow on the 1960s soap opera Peyton Place. And basically it was where Tommy Lee Jones landed his first role, referring to Love Story, okay? Jones did attend Harvard as the character in Love Story with former Vice President Al Gore. Al Gore was the vice president under Bill Clinton. Now, Eric Siegel, who wrote Love Story, did base the character of Oliver Barrett IV on a combination of Tommy Lee Jones and Al Gore. And if you guys remember, Virginia Giuffre did say that she had dinner with Gore and his wife Tipper. Okay. These movies, if you have not watched them, because movies have clues. Movies have clues. I would suggest that you watch them again. You can, These are old movies from the 60s, some from the 70s, even The Godfather with Al Pacino. There is a reason why Al Pacino is, in fact, such a world-renowned actor, and that will be, I believe, maybe in part 3 or maybe part 4 of my series on Jarecki. So to get back to Alec Baldwin, here's the thing. I mean, I keep saying that this is the people who report on Jeffrey Epstein or the Franklin scandal or the Jimmy Savile case or what happened at Boys Town before Franklin, or what happened at Boys Town after Franklin was exposed, or what happened in Australia, or what happened with like this mass murderer or that, Ted Bundy or any of these things. I mean, or even the Danny Castellero story, or even the Promise Software story. People will take these and put them into a little box, a little containment box. And then these boxes, they put a lid on these. And you do not then see, if you only focus on these and you don't let yourself see how it merges into these other people, even if, let's say, it's in a different country, like, for example, Jeffrey Epstein in the United States, theoretically, right? And Jimmy Savile in the United Kingdom. If these stories about these criminals remain contained and spoken about only with that title, with that header, this is about X, this is about Y, this is about Z, the public will never see the full scope of the problem, because this is more of a, it's just it's the same problem. I don't know how it's just the same problem. You're just looking at it's like a I can't say the word right now, kaleidoscope. Yeah, that's probably how to pronounce it. It's like that. Depending on how you move it, you see a different thing. But people tend to move it and leave it locked and only focus on one aspect of it. I don't even like using the term octopus anymore because it's no longer relevant. I think it's just, we have to look at all of these as part of one problem. And that problem would be, I'm going to leave the answer blank because clearly I want you to offer your input, and I want to make sure that this stays here for you to listen to. Okay. Regarding our friend Alec Baldwin, these are some basic facts. He was born on April the 3rd, 1958 in Amityville, New York. Now, Amityville, many of you may know, it is where the country's most horrific and haunted house is located. So I'll just give you a quick rundown of what happened in Amityville. And there are a lot of movies that have been made about Amityville, the haunted house and all of that. So on November 13, 1974, a man by the name of Ronald DeFeo Jr., born in 1951, killed his entire family, meaning his mother, his father, and his 4 siblings. And the 4 siblings were ages 9, 12, 13, and 18. He killed them in their beds. They were all found face down. He was a heavy user of heroin and LSD. What do these drugs remind you of? Yes, a 3-letter agency, right? Well, he was a frequent user of this, and it is believed that he drugged his family members. And that is how There was basically no screams. Neighbors didn't hear anything. That is how he killed his. I mean, can you imagine? You have a kid in your house. He's your eldest son. He's in your house. And suddenly he kills you, your husband and your wife, and all your children. Nightmare. But this is what drugs will do. And the United States has had a very big problem with drugs going back a very, very long time, as has the United Kingdom. Okay, and we can talk about this separately. So within a month, another family, George and Kathy Lutz, moved into the house at Amityville, where Alec Baldwin was born. Now, he wasn't born in the house, but he was a neighbor. They moved in with their 3 children without having any knowledge of the murders, and they began to experience paranormal phenomena. And basically, they fled the property after only 28 days, claiming there were strange odors that came and went, that there were doors opening and closing, slamming themselves, that there were strange substance appeared on the floor, somehow levitating Kathy, the wife and mother, turning her visibly, changing her from a young woman into an old woman. And what this family did is they just took their children and they ran out the door. They left their belongings behind. Alec Baldwin, through his paternal line, is descendant from a passenger on the Mayflower, and is the 14th generation of his family that's born in the United States. His father was the 13th, and Howland, the passenger on the Mayflower, was the assistant and personal secretary to one of the first politicians by the name of Governor John Carver. So before going to college, apparently while still in high school, Alec was a busboy at Studio 54. Yes, Studio 54, owned by Steve Rubell and Ian Schrager. Now, Schrager's father was better known as Max the Jew. He was an associate of Meyer Lansky, and whose attorney was Roy Cohn. We've heard a lot about Roy Cohn, but we haven't heard about Roy Cohn as it pertains to anything connected to Alec Baldwin. Nor did many people know, for example, that Baldwin worked at Studio 54. Now, I know a lot about Studio 54 because clearly I live in the city. And I know someone who did work there as a DJ during the almost 3 years that the club was open. And what I know is that the bartenders and the busboys were kind of sort of required to pleasure their male clientele, if you catch my drift. That's what I heard from someone who actually worked there, someone that I know. Okay. Let me continue with perhaps some other things. Now, about the club, Studio 54, it was located in a formerly kind of like, it had been used by CBS for a lot of their shows. CBS, as you know, is part of the initial 3 television stations that we had in the United States. We had CBS, NBC, and ABC. And referring back to the Church Committee hearings of 1975, Sig Mickelson, then CEO of CBS, commencing in 1954, said that by the time he became head of CBS, there had been an existing arrangement with the, quote, 3-letter agency. So this location selected to become Studio 54, where Andy Warhol went, where Donald Trump went, where all the models went, where it was kind of like a mishmash of different people. And you know what? There's a Netflix documentary on Studio 54 now. It's still there. It's been there for the longest time. If you haven't seen it, see it. But watch for clues. Watch for clues. Don't just watch either a documentary or a movie passively anymore. You know, watch for clues. All right, so between 1976 and 1979, Alec attended George Washington University, located in Washington, D.C. Now, here's the thing. How does this guy, from what he claims is a poor background, attend a university located in Washington, D.C.? That raised a lot of red flags for me. And of course, it kind of also answered a lot of questions for me. Among the school's notable alumni include J. Edgar Hoover, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, John Foster Dulles, his brother Allen Dulles, and I can go on, but you get my drift, right? Oh, Al Gore also attended that school. Okay. Oh, and who else attended that school? Donald Barr. Yes, that Donald Barr. So, in 1979, Alec ran for student body president. He lost. However, he received a letter from former President Richard Nixon, a private letter, a personal letter signed by Richard Nixon. Now, the reason I bring this up is because Jeffrey Epstein claimed that he met that he met Stephen Hoffenberg, who was his partner in Towers Financial, via Nixon's Attorney General, John Mitchell. Now, in the letter, which is hard to find anywhere online, Nixon addresses him as Mr. Alexander R. Baldwin III. That's a very prestigious and a very elite, wouldn't you? I mean, like, really? So there's a lot to this that basically has not really been talked about before, because we've just taken a lot of these actors at face value. We haven't looked to see where they fit in, or where they may fit in into the grand scheme of things regarding, I don't know, I'm going to just call it the power elite. The letter basically goes on to state that they have a mutual friend. And then this mutual friend is connected to someone else in a position of power in the UK. Alec transfers to the Tisch School, located in New York University. New York University, as many of you may know, is where Jeffrey Epstein went to school. And then the high school that he attended, along with some of his brothers, depending on the age, because there's a big age difference with the Baldwin brothers, is Berner High School in Massapequa, New York. As it turns out, that's the same high school that the Gilgo Beach serial killer Rex Hauerman attended. And then and Billy Baldwin tweeted this, that, oh, the serial killer was his classmate, and he tweeted this on July of 2023, I believe, when it made the news. Now, the accidental shooting I took a screen image of the actual thing, and Alec Baldwin is a tall guy. He's much taller than I ever, because whenever I saw him, he was seated. I didn't see him standing up. I didn't know how tall he was, but he's a pretty tall guy, pretty imposing guy. And well, basically, what happened was in January of 2023, he was officially charged with the fatal shooting of Helena Hutchins, the cinematographer on the set of Rust, of which he is the producer. So she is the wife of an attorney who represented a man by the name of Michael Sussman, who was indicted for lying to the FBI about 2016 presidential nominee Hillary Clinton. Now, if you know anything about Baldwin, you will see how he is connected to one or the other political machine that I'm not going to go into here. The other thing that I discovered is that Alec Baldwin and Woody Allen have a very long friendship that goes back many, many decades. And Baldwin, in fact, has appeared in several of Allen's movies. Again, when I say you guys be vigilant when you're watching, don't be passive when you're watching a movie or a documentary, kind of start taking notice. Well, who's in it? Who produced it? How are these people connected? Because it's not necessarily random. Because as it turns out, he's also appeared, Alec Baldwin, in films by another man alleged to be similar to Harvey Weinstein and very close friends of the Jarecki family. Now, this man who is close to Epstein, close to Woody Allen, close to Harvey Weinstein, close to the Jareckis, has been accused by shy of 400 women. He is worse than what we have heard about Harvey Weinstein. I'm going to leave his name out of this for this podcast. But you can see photos of Alec Baldwin hugging and kissing him. And basically, he traveled with him to many places, and they're very, very close friends. So you have to ask yourself, is Alec Baldwin so innocent? I'm going to use that term, that word, that he doesn't know a predator when he sees one. I mean, he is literally, if you look at everyone in his immediate circle, they're all predators. They're all predators. So what does that say about Baldwin? I mean, I'm just asking you because I do want your input. All right, guys, give this a like. Have a really good day. Talk soon. Come over to my Substack because that's where you're going to read all the stuff I work on. All right, guys, bye.